My name is Jake, and if I ever had any doubts about where I stood in my family, they vanished the day I stumbled upon the will. It wasn't even some dramatic reveal. No teary family meeting, no heartfelt conversation. I found out by accident. I was at my parents' house a few months ago, helping Dad with some paperwork. That's been the routine for the past 5 years, me helping with bills, groceries, home repairs, you name it. Meanwhile, my brother Eric, he does nothing. No job, no responsibilities, just loafs around while my parents cater to him like he's royalty. That day, Dad asked me to scan some legal documents. That's when I saw it. A folder labeled Estate Plan and Last Will. I wasn't snooping, but curiosity got the better of me. After everything I'd done, I thought it was fair to take a look. What I saw made my stomach drop. Everything was going to Eric. The house, the savings, all of it. My name wasn't even mentioned. Just a generic line about loving both sons equally. I felt my chest tighten. This couldn't be real. I sat frozen at the table, the words blurring together as my pulse raced. Years of paying their bills, fixing broken faucets, and stocking their fridge flashed through my mind. And Eric, always lounging around, gaming and texting his friends. I heard footsteps approaching and quickly dropped the folder onto the table, my fists clenching instinctively. My dad entered, eyebrows furrowed. "Jake, what's taking so long?" he asked casually, oblivious. Unable to hide my anger, I held up the will, my voice shaking but firm. "Seriously, Dad, everything goes to Eric. After everything I've done?" His face went pale before he forced a dismissive sigh. "Jake, it's not what you think." My voice rose sharply, frustration boiling over. "Not what I think. I've spent years paying your mortgage while Eric just sits there and you give everything to him." Dad glanced away, muttering vaguely, "It's complicated." No explanations, no apologies. Just the empty look of someone expecting me to quietly accept my fate. I stared back in disbelief, betrayal sinking deeper into my chest with every passing second. I should have walked out right then and there, but instead I called for Mom. If this was some twisted plan they both agreed on, I wanted to hear it from both of them. When she walked in and saw the will in my hands, her expression immediately shifted. Guilt, at least she didn't try to pretend like nothing was wrong, but the words that came out of her mouth made my blood boil. "Jake, honey, you don't need the inheritance," she said softly. "You have a good job, you're independent. Eric, well, he struggles. We just want to make sure he's taken care of." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't about love or fairness, it was about rewarding laziness. I had been their safety net for years, and now I was being punished for being dependable. I stared at her, my voice eerily calm. "Got it. Glad to know where we stand." Then I turned, walked out of the house, and slammed the door behind me. I wasn't their son anymore. I was just the guy they used until Eric could inherit everything. After I left their house that day, I didn't call, didn't text, nothing. For the first time in years, I let them deal with their own problems. No more grocery runs, no more repairs, no more money. I figured they'd notice pretty quickly, and I was right. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Dad. "Property taxes are due." That was it. No apology, no checking in, just a demand. I stared at the screen, amazed at how predictable they were. They still saw me as their personal ATM. I replied, "I'm sure Eric will handle it since the house is his and all." 5 minutes later, Mom called. I didn't answer. Then came the guilt trip. "Jake, please don't be like this. We need to talk." Now they wanted to talk, now that the bills were piling up. I waited an hour before replying. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. Now live with it." For once, I felt like I had control, and honestly, it felt damn good. I thought that would be the end of it for the day, but of course it wasn't. Later that evening, Eric decided to chime in. His name popped up on my phone, and I already knew it wouldn't be good. I opened the message, and surprise, it was exactly what I expected. Eric texted, "Dude, why are you being such a drama queen? It's not a big deal, just help them out like you always do." My jaw clenched, not a big deal. Was he serious? I fired back. "No, you've got it covered, you're the favorite, remember." His reply came quickly. "OMG, you're seriously mad about the will? Grow up, man, it's just money." That line hit me hard, just money. Now that it was his asterisk to inherit, it was suddenly no big deal. I shot back. "Then you won't mind using some of that money to pay the mortgage, right?" Silence. Typical Eric. All bark, no spine. For once, I wasn't letting him or anyone else guilt me into submission. I had drawn the line, and this time I wasn't backing down. The next morning, I woke up to a notification that made me freeze, a bank transfer request. I blinked at the screen, still groggy, thinking it was a mistake. But no, it was real. My mom had sent me a request for $3,500. No message, no explanation. Just the exact amount they needed to cover the mortgage. I stared at it, half laughing at the audacity. They weren't even asking anymore, they were just expecting. I declined the request without hesitation. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mom. I didn't answer. Then came the text. "Jake, I know you saw the request. Why did you decline it?" I took a deep breath and replied, "Because it's not my responsibility. Try Eric." Another call, declined. Then another message. "We're going to lose the house if you don't help us." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen, torn between rage and disbelief. After everything, they still thought I'd come running, still thought I owed them. But I didn't, not anymore. Later that evening, the guilt trip campaign went into full swing. Mom texted again. "Jake, we're your parents. Family takes care of each other. We did so much for you growing up, and now you're just abandoning us." I closed my eyes and took a long breath, gripping the phone tightly. Abandoning them? I had paid their bills, fixed their home, stocked their fridge for years, while Eric played video games and slept in. And now, when they're facing the consequences of their own choices, suddenly I'm the bad guy. I replied, "You made it clear I wasn't part of the family when you left me out of the will. Now Eric can take care of you." I imagined her reading that, gasping, maybe even crying. She always had a flair for dramatics. A few minutes later, Dad chimed in with a text of his own. "We're not asking for much, just enough to cover the mortgage for a few more months. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word echoed in my head like a slap. I clenched my jaw. I had given them everything, and still it wasn't enough. That night, as if things couldn't get more absurd, Eric decided to add his 2 cents again. I got a text just before midnight. "Dude, just send them the money already. You're making this a bigger deal than it is." My grip on the phone tightened. I could practically hear his smug tone through the screen. I replied, "You mean the same money you're inheriting. Why don't you send it?" His response came quickly, as always when he felt cornered. "You know I don't have that kind of cash right now." Of course, suddenly it wasn't just money anymore. Suddenly it mattered. I shot back. "Guess you better figure it out then, bro. You're the one they chose." No reply this time, just silence. I set my phone down and leaned back into the couch, exhaling slowly. For once, I felt oddly at peace. Like I had finally taken off a burden I didn't even realize I was carrying. I wasn't the villain here. I had given more than enough. Now it was Eric's turn to step up, or not. Either way, I was done. The next day, I was just settling into work when my phone rang. It was the front desk of my apartment building. The receptionist sounded uneasy. "Hey, Jake, your parents are here. They say it's an emergency." I nearly dropped my coffee. "What, they're saying you won't answer your phone," she added. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Of course, they didn't get their way, so now they were showing up uninvited. "Please don't let them up. I'm not expecting anyone," I said firmly. She hesitated. "They're being kind of pushy." I clenched my jaw. "Tell them I'm not available." I hung up, heart pounding. Seconds later, a text from Mom lit up my screen. "We're downstairs. Open the door." No apology. No explanation, just another demand. Another message followed. "We're not leaving until you talk to us." I stood there in disbelief. I wasn't shocked they came. I was shocked it took them this long. If they thought showing up would break me, they had seriously miscalculated. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was war. I took a deep breath, grabbed my keys, and stormed downstairs. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, pure fury. When I reached the front entrance, there they were. My mom, Dad, and Eric stood like they were staging a family intervention. Mom had her arms crossed, that familiar, disappointed look on her face. Dad stood stiff, hands in his pockets like he was forced to be there. And Eric, he had the nerve to look bored, like this whole thing was just an inconvenience. I opened the door and didn't say a word. Mom jumped in immediately, all drama. "Jake, finally, we need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "No, you need to leave." Her eyes widened like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Excuse me." I didn't blink. "You heard me. You don't get to just show up and demand money. That's insane." Dad scoffed. "You're going to let us lose the house over a petty grudge." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, you mean the grudge where you cut me out of the will? That one." Mom gasped like I had just slapped her. "Jake, that's not fair. We only did what we thought was best for the family." I tilted my head. "Best for the family? You mean best for Eric? Just say it." Silence. Heavy, awkward silence. Eric finally spoke, barely above a mumble. "Look, man, I didn't ask for this." I turned to him, something inside me snapping. "No, you just take everything that's handed to you. You're 28, Eric. Get a job." His cheeks flushed. "What the hell, dude?" I took a step forward. You want to inherit the house, start acting like a homeowner. You want to be the golden child, start paying their damn bills. I'm done being your personal bank. He looked down, suddenly very interested in his sneakers. Mom tried to step in again, her voice gentle, pleading. Jake, he's your brother. I nodded slowly. Yeah, and I've supported him more than you ever have. Dad's face darkened. You're being selfish. I actually laughed, loud and real this time. Says the man who gave everything to one kid and expected the other to foot the bill. Mom's voice softened, hoping to pull me back. Jake, we thought you'd understand. You're so mature, so responsible. Of course you don't need anything from us. I stared at her in disbelief. So you decided to reward the one who never grew up and punish the one who did. That makes sense to you? She faltered, lips parting as if to answer, but nothing came. I turned to Eric, who was still quiet. What's your excuse, huh? Years to grow up to do something, anything, but you didn't, because you knew they'd always take care of you. He looked up, guilt flickering across his face. I didn't ask for this, man. I nodded. Right. You just benefited. He said nothing. I turned back to my parents. You say family takes care of each other, but you never took care of me. You used me. That one hit. Even Dad looked shaken. Jake. We didn't mean to, Mom whispered. But you did, I replied calmly. You made a choice, and now I'm making mine. The silence that followed said more than any of them ever could. As I turned and walked back inside, I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The silence behind me said enough. I felt hollow but also strangely light, as if I'd just dropped a weight I'd been dragging for years. I sat down on my couch, phone buzzing again. A message from Dad. Wow, after everything we've done for you, you're really going to abandon us? I stared at it for a long second, then typed back, No, you abandoned me. I'm just finally accepting it. Then I blocked his number. The sense of finality hit like a wave, but I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself. And I knew that wouldn't sit well with them, but I didn't care. I wasn't the villain in their story. I just stopped playing the role they wrote for me. Whatever came next, it would be on my terms. No more guilt, no more manipulation. Just freedom. And honestly, that was worth more than any inheritance ever could be. I expected things to quiet down after that, but I should have known better. Less than a day later, my phone lit up with notifications from Facebook. At first, I thought it was a coincidence until I saw my mom's post. A long, vague rant about selfish children and how family always comes first. She didn't name me, but it was clear who she meant. Comments poured in from her friends, all consoling her, calling me ungrateful. Then came my dad's post, even more dramatic. He talked about sacrifice, how they gave everything for their kids, and how painful it was to be betrayed. He tagged me, just in case anyone didn't get the hint. And then Eric, of course. He chimed in with his own post about what it means to love your parents and how some people just don't get it. I sat there, stunned. They had turned me into the villain. They were rewriting the story for the world to see and painting themselves as the victims. I wasn't just cut out of the will anymore. I was being erased from the family narrative altogether. I didn't react right away. I sat with the weight of it for a few hours, scrolling through post after post, reading comment after comment. Most of them were people I hadn't spoken to in years. Extended family, family friends, distant cousins. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them were against me. I saw words like ungrateful, cold-hearted, and even abandoning your parents. It didn't matter that none of them knew the truth. They only knew the version that had been fed to them by people who'd spent years hiding behind a carefully curated mask of martyrdom. And the more I read, the more I realized something. I couldn't let them have the last word. So I opened my own account, the one I only used for close friends, and I started writing. Not out of rage, but clarity. I needed the truth to be out there. My side. My story. The real one. Because if they wanted to turn this into a public spectacle, I wasn't going to sit quietly and be crucified for finally standing up for myself. I hit post on my message, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. I hadn't written it to get revenge or start drama. I just wanted people to hear the truth. The real story, not the version twisted and reshaped by guilt and manipulation. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few friends would read it and understand. But within hours, the reactions started pouring in. Old classmates, distant relatives, even people I barely remembered, all sending messages of support. Some said they had gone through the same thing. Others simply wrote, "I'm proud of you," or "You did the right thing." It was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. For once, I wasn't alone. My words had finally cut through the noise and reached someone, And it reminded me that I wasn't crazy for standing my ground. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't selfish. I was just done being used. The validation wasn't something I had asked for, but it helped more than I could admit. I had finally spoken my truth, and people heard me. But the peace didn't last long. The next day, I got a message from Eric. It was short, bitter, and filled with entitlement. "You're a traitor. You really had to air all our business online. You have no respect for family." I stared at the screen, shaking my head. Respect? Coming from the guy who let me carry the weight of the family for years, I replied simply, "You mean like the respect I got when you took everything and I got nothing?" He didn't answer. Instead, my phone rang. It was Dad. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another message popped up. "You've ruined everything, Jake. You'll regret this. You'll regret turning your back on your own family." I didn't even flinch. For once, their words couldn't reach me. I had nothing left to give and no guilt left to feel. I typed one final reply to Eric. "If telling the truth makes me the villain, so be it, but at least now everyone knows who you really are." Then I turned off my phone and walked outside. The sun felt different, lighter, like I was finally free. The following days were quiet, eerily quiet. No texts, no calls, no dramatic posts. It was like the storm had passed and all that was left was the wreckage. I found myself staring out the window one morning, coffee in hand, wondering if they were finally done. If they had finally accepted that I wasn't going to play the role anymore. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel tense. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt still, peaceful, like I had stepped out of a toxic fog and could finally breathe. I started focusing on my own life again, cooking real meals, going for walks, catching up with old friends. I even started sleeping better. It's funny how your body holds onto stress like it's armor. And when you finally let go of that burden, you realize how heavy it was. I wasn't sure what came next, if they'd try again, or if this was truly the end. But either way, I wasn't afraid anymore. They had lost their hold on me, and I was finally beginning to live my own story. One evening, a message came in from someone I hadn't heard from in years, my cousin Lily. She'd seen the Facebook drama unfold and wanted to check in. "Just wanted to say I read your post," she wrote, "and I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. You deserved better." That one message hit harder than I expected, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real, simple, honest. Someone actually saw me, not the version my parents painted, but the person I actually was. We ended up chatting for hours. She told me stories I'd never heard before, how even as kids, everyone in the family noticed the favoritism, how she'd always wondered why I stuck around for so long. That conversation unlocked something in me. It reminded me that I hadn't imagined everything, that I wasn't overreacting, that I wasn't alone. For the first time, I felt connected to my family, not the ones who took, but the ones who understood. And in that moment, I realized maybe I wasn't cut off. Maybe I was just finally aligned with the right people. A week later, I got one last letter. Not a text, not an email, a real letter handwritten from my mom. It was unexpected. I almost didn't open it, but something in me needed closure. Her handwriting was shaky but familiar. The letter didn't beg, it didn't guilt, it just explained. She wrote about how hard it had been watching the family break apart, how scared she was of losing both her sons. She admitted that maybe they hadn't made the right choices, that maybe they'd taken me for granted. She didn't ask me to forgive them, just to understand. And somehow that made all the difference. I wasn't ready to call or visit. I wasn't sure when or if that would ever happen. But reading her words made something loosen inside my chest. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting what happened. Maybe it was about making peace with it. I folded the letter, set it down beside me, and stared out the window. I still had a long road ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was walking it alone. In the days that followed, I didn't respond to the letter, but I didn't throw it away either. I kept it on my desk, sometimes rereading it, sometimes just letting it sit there. It reminded me that even if wounds don't heal overnight, acknowledgement matters. One morning, I got a message from Lily again. "Want to grab lunch this weekend?" I paused, then smiled and replied, "Yeah, I'd like that." It felt strange, choosing connection after so much distance, but good too. Maybe family didn't have to mean obligation, maybe it could mean choice. That weekend, Lily and I met at a quiet cafe. We talked about everything, childhood, our parents, where we were now. For the first time, I felt like I had family who saw me clearly. No expectations, no strings, just presence. When I got home, I looked at the letter again. I still didn't know what the future held. But for now, I had peace. I had truth. And I had people, real people, who saw my worth without needing anything in return. That night after dinner, I sat alone at my desk and opened my journal. I hadn't written in it for a while, too much noise, too much chaos, but tonight felt different. I needed to put it all somewhere. I wrote about the will, the betrayal, the silence, the Facebook posts, the letter, and Lily. About how healing doesn't always come from the people who hurt you, but sometimes from the ones who show up afterward. My hand moved steadily across the page, each word feeling like a small release. I didn't write for closure or for clarity. I wrote to remember, to mark how far I'd come, to remind myself that I didn't cave, I didn't go back. I chose myself, and that mattered. When I finished, I closed the journal and sat in the stillness of my room, listening to the soft hum of the night outside. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for the next disaster. I was present. And that, more than anything, felt like real progress. A few days later, I ran into my neighbor, Mrs. Ellis. She was an older woman who'd lived next door for years. We'd exchanged small talk occasionally, but never much more. This time, though, she stopped me on the stairs. "Jake," she said gently, "I saw that post you made. Brave of you to speak up like that. Not many people would." I blinked, a little surprised. "Thanks," I said, unsure what else to offer. She smiled kindly, the sort of smile that feels like a blanket on a cold day. "You remind me a lot of my son. He went through something similar. It takes strength to walk away when it hurts." Her words sat with me long after we parted ways. It reminded me that sometimes healing comes in unexpected moments, in a stairwell, in a stranger's validation, in a quiet nod that says, "You're not crazy." And for every family that tears you down, there are people who will help lift you back up. You just have to be willing to let them. That weekend, I drove out to a nearby hiking trail I used to visit before everything got so heavy. I needed space, air, something real. The path was quiet, the air crisp, and the world didn't feel so loud for once. I walked for over an hour, thinking about how much had changed. Not just with my family, but with me. A few months ago, I would have answered every call, tried to fix everything, buried myself under guilt. Now, I was learning to let go, to let people face the consequences of their choices, to stop making myself responsible for everyone else's peace. At the top of the trail, there was a small overlook with a bench. I sat there for a long time, watching the trees sway, the birds glide, the world move on without needing anything from me. And for once, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. Not an explanation, not an apology, not my silence. Just me, present, breathing, finally learning that healing doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like a quiet bench on a mountain and knowing you're going to be okay. A few nights later, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open. Not for work, not for social media, but just to write. I opened a blank document and titled it, "Things I Wish I'd Said Sooner." I didn't know where it was going. I just started typing. Thoughts, moments, reflections, everything I had carried for so long without saying aloud. I wrote about the weight of being the responsible one, the silence that follows sacrifice, the pain of being invisible until you're needed. But I also wrote about the strength I'd found, the boundaries I was learning to hold, the relationships I was choosing to nurture. By the time I stopped, it was well past midnight. I saved the file and closed the laptop, not because it was done, but because I finally felt heard, even if only by myself. Healing, I was learning, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet and slow and deeply personal. Sometimes it was just giving yourself space to finally speak, even if no one else was listening. The next morning, I went for a walk through the park near my apartment. It was early, too early for most people, which made it perfect. The air was crisp, and the trees were just starting to turn amber and gold. I watched a kid and his dad tossing a frisbee near the field, their laughter echoing through the quiet. I thought about how different my story had been, not bitterly, just honestly. Not all families are built on love and fairness. Some are built on obligation and silence. But I was starting to see that I wasn't doomed to repeat those patterns. I had a say. I had power. As I sat down on a bench near the pond, ducks waddling along the bank, I took a deep breath. I still didn't know where everything would lead, if I'd ever speak to my parents again, if Eric would ever grow up. But for now, that didn't matter. What mattered was this moment, this quiet. This peace I had built, not inherited. It was mine. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Later that evening, I pulled out a small photo album I hadn't looked through in years. It was tucked away on a high shelf in my closet, dusty, untouched. I flipped through the pages slowly, pausing on each photo. Birthdays, beach trips, school plays. There were smiles, there was laughter. But now I saw things I hadn't seen before, the way I always stood slightly apart, how Eric was always front and center. I wasn't angry, not anymore. Just aware, memory has a way of softening edges, of making things seem sweeter than they were. But tonight, I wasn't romanticizing anything. I was seeing it clearly, all of it. And that clarity didn't hurt like I thought it would. It just made sense. This was the story I came from, imperfect, flawed, and that was okay. I closed the album gently and set it back where I found it. I didn't need to rewrite the past. I just didn't have to carry it the same way anymore. A week later, I got a message from Eric. Short, simple, no insults this time, just, "I've been thinking maybe you were right." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't know what he meant exactly, or if he even understood what I had gone through. But I also didn't need an apology to move forward. Not anymore. Growth didn't always come wrapped in neat resolutions. Sometimes it came in silence. Sometimes in awkward, clumsy messages. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to make sure I wasn't falling into old habits. But a few hours later I replied, "Took you long enough." A minute passed. Then Eric replied, "Yeah, I know." That was it. No promises, no big emotional breakthrough. But maybe, just maybe, it was a crack in the wall. I didn't expect us to be brothers in the way we never were. But I didn't need to carry the resentment anymore either. I closed my phone and went back to what I was doing, living. A few days later, I was cleaning out a drawer when I found a birthday card, one I'd bought for my dad years ago but never gave him. It was simple, just said, "Thanks for everything, Dad." Back then, I'd meant it. Or at least I'd hoped it would one day be true. I sat down at the edge of my bed, holding the card like it was some relic from a different version of me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just felt distant, like I had finally stepped outside the storm and could see it clearly for what it was. I didn't throw the card away. I didn't keep it either. I placed it gently in the donation box beside old books and forgotten clothes. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need it anymore. I was no longer the son waiting for approval. I was just Jake, a man building something new out of what was left, and that, I realized, was more than enough. On a quiet Sunday morning, I opened the windows, brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and let sunlight pour into the apartment. No texts, no missed calls, just the soft hum of life moving forward. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping slowly, taking in the stillness. This wasn't the life I thought I'd have. I had imagined something more traditional, holiday dinners, shared responsibilities, maybe even respect that came naturally. But what I had instead was something harder won and more honest. Boundaries, healing, a sense of self I'd fought to uncover. I didn't need a perfect family. I didn't need closure wrapped in a bow. I just needed peace, and I had found it slowly, stubbornly in the wreckage. Maybe the past would always sting a little. Maybe the gap between me and them would never close fully. But I had stopped bleeding. I had stopped trying to make people see my worth, because now I saw it for myself, and that changed everything.